Welcome back to the Defying Gravity podcast with Zach Goodman. Today, we're going to talk about the dynamic effort method and where many people are going wrong and how I'm using the dynamic effort method with my own athletes. Okay. So to get right to it, I think we first need to define what dynamic effort is so that we can see this bigger picture when it comes to the method. Okay. Essentially, dynamic effort method is a method that's going to involve accelerating submaximal weights at maximal voluntary velocities. Okay. Really big key on submaximal. Okay. So we're going to be using weights that are below our maximum threshold of moving a load. So essentially something below 90 some percent. Okay. That would be considered dynamic effort. Next thing is that we are moving it at maximal voluntary velocities. Okay. So that means that we are accelerating this bar as fast as possible. We're accelerating this load as fast as possible. Okay. So this is what essentially dynamic effort is, right? It's a really broad term for a lot of different types of uses. Okay. Again, when we look at it just as accelerating a submaximal load at maximal velocities, okay, that can mean a lot of different things. Doesn't necessarily have to mean a barbell. Okay. It can mean a lot of different pieces of equipment because load and external resistance is very broad, right? So I don't think that we should get necessarily pigeonholed into just the traditional kind of West Side use of dynamic effort. We need to look at this thing from a broad picture so we can understand how to apply it. Okay. This method most commonly is used to enhance an athlete's rate of force development. Okay. So simply this means allowing them to produce force quickly. This trains the body. This kind of sharpens that neural coordination to produce force very, very quickly. Okay. So this method is not meant to make an athlete stronger. Okay. This method is specifically used to make an athlete faster. Okay. And to make an athlete more powerful. Okay. But we're not enhancing power through force, access to force. We're enhancing power through our ability to produce it quickly. Okay. So we're enhancing it through speed and velocity rather than enhancing it through slow grinding weights and things like that. Okay. So that is how dynamic effort works, right? It's this different side of the spectrum. We've talked about brief maximal tension being a method to increase an athlete's absolute strength. Okay. Max effort and a method used to increase an athlete's absolute strength. Dynamic effort is going to be that opposite method. It's going to be the method that we use to make an athlete faster. Okay. And so again, it sharpens neural coordination at high velocities, right? And so this method was kind of originally talked about and kind of brought to the masses, right? In the 1970s, 80s. Okay. But it was coined and really pushed out in like the 1990s when it was published in a few different texts. Okay. Specifically, Science and Practice of Strength Training, where Dr. Zatsiorsky outlines all of the methods of muscular tension. Okay. Was built upon in Super Training and other texts. Okay. Verkhoshansky writes about in some of his texts as well about specific speeds that we need to be trying to touch. And we'll talk about that today. Okay. But this method, while it wasn't necessarily coined dynamic effort method in some of the other texts, it was coined that by Zatsiorsky. Okay. And so that is kind of where we get this name of dynamic effort, right? He coined this method, but this method has been used for a long, long time. And it necessarily wasn't coined dynamic effort, but that's kind of what we know it as now. Okay. And it was obviously popularized with West Side Barbell and brought to, America and really popularized by Louis Simmons, as well as some other coaches that have used it. But I think when we think of dynamic effort, we think of Louis Simmons, right? We think of West Side Barbell. We think of speed squats, speed pulls, right? We think of really, really strong people moving really, really heavy weights really fast. Okay. That's essentially what we think of when we think of dynamic effort. Okay. So a question I got from Nate Harvey, and this was a podcast that I've been meaning to do for a while. But Nate shot me a reply or message or whatever on Twitter and, asked me if I'm down with dynamic efforts, speed squats, speed pulls, things like that. Okay. We do not use any dynamic effort barbells. Okay. We don't use the dynamic effort method with barbells. Okay. We opt from some other means to use the dynamic effort method. Okay. Again, remember that we are using, we're essentially just accelerating a submaximal load at maximal voluntary velocities. Okay. So what this essentially means is that we can use any piece of equipment. Doesn't have to be barbell, can be other means, which we'll talk about. Okay. And so we're opting for jumps and throws and for our dynamic effort instead of barbells. Okay. So for example, speed squats. Okay. When people think of dynamic effort, they use speed squats. Okay. That's pretty commonly used. We don't do any speed squats. Okay. All of our squats are heavy and slow. Okay, because we use the brief maximal tension method for the squats. We use the dynamic effort method with weighted jumps. So specifically dumbbell jumps, the plyo swings. Okay, those are going to be things that we're using for our dynamic effort method. Okay, throws. Okay, med ball throws, things like that are dynamic effort. We also have jammer presses, which I like to use. So we use those for dynamic effort. While we don't speed bench, okay, we do some speed pressing and we do throwing. Okay, we just don't speed bench per se. Okay, and so these two things are going to take precedent over the barbell because they're much faster. Okay, I can throw a med ball much faster than I can accelerate a barbell. Okay, I can jump with dumbbells a lot faster than I can ever squat. Okay, I can jump on the plyo swing a lot faster than I can ever pull or squat. Okay, and so essentially the reason that we're using these meetings over the barbell, okay, is because like Virgil Shancy talks about, you have to be touching speeds at over 1.4 meters per second to elicit the optimal rate of force development for acceleration. Okay, so if we're trying to sharpen the nervous system for producing extreme force at extreme velocity, okay, we need to be touching speeds that are a lot faster than something that you're going to get out of a barbell, right? So the traditional 1 meter per second, 0.8 meter per second, 0.6 meter per second, traditional kind of barbell waves, okay, those are going to be a bit too slow. Okay, they're not going to be as fast as a jump. So we're going to opt for jumps for our athletes, okay, because they're way faster. Okay, which means that we are going to essentially train their nervous system to fire at extreme speeds. Okay, that we're not going to be able to get out of a barbell. Okay, even if you have a athlete try to accelerate 45 pounds in a bar, okay, probably unless they're in advanced, they have that coordination with the barbell, they're probably not going to elicit that speed, right? But there are some different ways you can work around this with bands and things like that. Okay. Yes. But still not going to touch a jump, right? Still never going to touch a jump. Okay. Jumps are always going to be faster than any sort of barbell lift. Okay. So those are going to take precedent. Okay. And so on to my next thing. So we obviously aren't using them for barbells, right? We're using them for throws and jumps and things like that. Okay. And so why are we not using dynamic effort? We've seen all the success. We've seen Westside Barbell produce, monster athletes, monster powerlifters. Okay. There's other coaches in the country that have had a ton of success with using speed squats and speed pulls. So specifically, why do I not like them? Okay. I think this goes back to the main point here is that it's too fast to make us strong. Okay. And we know specifically with young athletes, strength is the most important thing. We have to give them access to more force. Okay. Because they're so weak. So we need to specifically prioritize strength. So if we're going to use barbells, we're going to specifically target strength. Okay. We're going to attempt to increase their absolute strength. Okay. And so dynamic effort squats and pulls are too fast to make us strong, right? That's why we had that max effort day, right? That's why a Westside Barbell system uses max effort, because they know they're not going to get stronger from dynamic effort. Okay. If they are entering those zones, below 0.6, right? They're entering those 0.5s, 0.4s, 0.3s. Yes, they're going to see some carryover, right? But they're not getting specifically stronger from the dynamic effort, right? They are sharpening their ability to produce force, and they are sharpening their movement. They're practicing, right? And this is something I'm going to talk about, the big picture when it comes to dynamic effort. Dynamic effort can be looked at as practice, right? Because essentially we are practicing the things that we need to produce force quickly at, right? So if I have athletes that are never going to be tested on a barbell squat or barbell deadlift or whatever, there's, in my opinion, no reason to sharpen their ability to produce force quickly in those specific tasks, where I'd rather have them because they're going to be tested on jumps, right? They're going to be tested on throws and retested on things like that. I would rather sharpen that ability, right? Because dynamic effort can be seen as practice. Okay. So you're essentially practicing applying force very quickly in a specific setting or task. Okay. Other thing. Okay. Talked about this already. We need to elicit speeds at over 1.4 meters per second. Okay. To make us quite a bit faster. Okay. It's the same problem we see with Olympic lifts. Okay. Olympic lifts are too fast to make us really strong, right? Okay. It's why Olympic lifters are squatting and pulling all the time. They're pulling heavy, squatting heavy, right? Because they know they need to get stronger. Okay. They're also too slow to make us way faster. This is why Olympic lifts don't work. Right. So we aren't seeing great carryover from Olympic lifts rather than things like dumbbell jumps. Dumbbell jumps are much faster. Okay. Speed squats and speed pulls are the same way. Okay. They are too fast to make us stronger, Okay, we know this already. That's why we use the max effort method, right? That's why people use max effort. That's why I use the brief maximal tension method. Okay, they're also too slow to make us way faster. Okay, they're not an efficient means to make you faster. Okay, because again, it's just like an Olympic lift. Yes, you can clean a weight at 1 meters per second, right? You can probably clean a weight at close to 1.4 meters per second. And with Chinese national teams and stuff like that, they use cleans and snatches and things like that. But they're using really really light loads, right, to accelerate really fast. Okay, because there's so much displacement in the barbell, so they can accelerate it much faster, right? Same reason benches are so much slower. If you tendo or VBT a bench versus squat, you're going to see how much slower they are, because there's just less displacement, so there's just less time to accelerate. And so again, with a squat or a deadlift and something like that, there's just not enough time to accelerate. Whereas a jump, right, or a throw, there's essentially, there's a time to accelerate, but essentially there's not, because you're jumping straight up in the air, you're throwing it through the air, right? So that time to accelerate is just to overcome gravity. Okay. And there's going to be a ton of displacement. Displacement is completely dependent on your relative strength. Okay. Um, so that's one of our problems, right? So speed squats and speed pulls suffer from kind of the same thing as Olympic lifts, because they're too slow, but they're also too fast. Okay. So they don't make us stronger, and they're not going to make us way faster than a dumbbell jump. Okay. Um, and so what we need to understand is that in order to produce a lot more force, okay, to have access to more force, we need something a lot slower. Okay. So that's why we use those really heavy weights. Okay. We also need something a lot faster. Okay. And so what this means is it doesn't tap into high threshold motor units because of the nature of velocity, right? In order to tap into these high threshold motor units, okay, we need either extreme force being produced, right? We need to have something really, really slow, really grindy, okay, to strain against. Okay. We also could have something of extreme velocity, like sprinting or max effort jumping. Okay. So that how we tap into high threshold motor units is through extremes. Okay. We can't tap into high threshold motor units with those medium um, kind of weights or velocities. Okay. So we need something that's extreme. We want extreme adaptation. We need extreme velocities. Okay. Whether that's really slow or that's really fast. Okay. And so essentially, it's really slow means something 0.3 meters per second or slower. Okay. And then faster, we're talking about something realistically, we probably want something over 2 meters per second, somewhere between 2 to 9 meters per second. If you're sprinting, it's going to be like 9 meters per second. Okay. Or more. Could be up to 10, depends how fast you are. Okay. But essentially, that's what we want. We want something of extreme speed and extreme slow. Okay. Dynamic effort, barbell squats, and pulls are not going to elicit those speeds. Okay. And so what are our solutions? What are we doing instead, right? I already said brief maximal tension method. Okay. This method essentially allows us to summon more motor units in action through straining. Okay. So this allows us to basically gain access to more force, to more motor units. Okay. Because we're straining against maximal weights. Okay. And so this is going to increase absolute strength, which is inherently going to improve rate of force development. Okay. Because the more absolute strength you have, the more access you have, which means that even if your rate of force development doesn't come up, you now just have more access. So say you can only produce 65% of your, maximal force at a specific velocity, but now you just raise the ceiling. Well, now your floor raises, right? So if I can produce, 1,000 newtons at, 0.8 meters per second or something like that, and, that's, whatever, 70 some percent of my absolute, force. Okay. Now I raise that level of force. Now I have access to a lot more. Now I can produce more at a faster speed without actually sharpening the ability to produce it faster. Okay, if that makes sense. So essentially, I'm just raising my ceiling so then my floor can also come up. So absolute strength will still increase rate of force development because now you just have access to more, right? So even if my percentage of rate of force development doesn't come up, I'm still increasing absolute strength. My rate of force development is still going to come up. Okay. It's just going to stay at the same percentage, right? But I'm actually going to be able to produce, more newtons in the same amount of time. Okay. And so brief maximal tension is going to work better. So our squats and pulls and benches and things like that, we're using the brief maximal tension method only. Okay. So when we barbell bench, we barbell back squat, we deadlift, all those other things, box squats, everything that we do. Okay. Brief maximal tension. Okay. And then for our dynamic effort method, we're going to do weighted jumps. Okay. For a couple different reasons. Okay. Because we're going to jump for dynamic effort, there's a few potential advantages to jumping. Okay. Rather than weighted sprinting. Okay. And that's what I'm going to talk about. Firstly, weighted jumps. easier to recover from, right? You could technically jump 4 days a week. I know people that do that. I used to do that. Okay. Works really well. So because we can be so frequent with rated jumps, you can't be as frequent with a dynamic effort squat, right? Try speed squatting 4 days a week. You're going to get run down. Try doing weighted jumps 4 days a week. You're not going to get run down. Okay. Because the weight is so much faster. Okay. It's not going to break you down as much. Okay. And so again, you can recover so much faster from jumping. Okay. So you can do it more frequently. And we know that when we want to increase neural coordination, the fastest, most efficient means possible, frequency is a trigger that we want to be pulling. Okay. And so again, jumping offers us that frequency that we need to have. Okay. Second thing, it's more specific to the task that's going to be tested, right? If you have athletes, okay, if you have athletes, they go to combine, they're going to be tested on jumps. They're not being tested on how much force they produce on a barbell and things like that. Okay. They're going to be vertical jumping, broad jumping. Okay. They're going to be sprinting and things like that. Okay. Dynamic effort, like I said, can be seen as practice, right? We are practicing the task that we want to be able to apply force in that specific context. Okay. So jumping, for example, is extremely sport specific, right? It's extremely specific to the test, right? We want to give our athletes the answers to the test before they go and take it. Okay. By dumbbell jumping and plyo swings and throwing and things like that, we are giving them the answers they need, right? They are practicing producing force and that's those specific tasks as quickly as possible. So dynamic effort can be seen as practice. Okay. If you have a power lifter, okay, the speed squats and speed pulls are fantastic because they are practicing their skill. They're practicing that task at a higher velocity. Okay. It also is going to serve as a velocity shift, which is going to allow them to recover from the max day because the max day is the most important day for a powerlifter because absolute strength is king. Okay. Absolute strength is also king for athletes. Okay. So keep this in mind as well. And because they're so young, I can use brief maximal tension 4 days a week. I also can use dynamic effort 4 days a week. I can use all these different methods every single training session because they're so young, their trainability is so good. Okay. And so again, jumps are really just practice for the nervous system. They really just, you're basically just sharpening their ability to produce force quickly. And it's so easy to recover from. You can do them very quickly. Okay. So again, this kind of thing that I say, sharpen, not lengthen. Okay. So dynamic effort sharpens, dynamic effort does not lengthen. Okay. If we have a sword, right, dynamic effort is going to sharpen that blade to slice through gravity, right? But if I want a longer sword, absolute strength lengthens the sword. Okay. So absolute strength is the length, dynamic effort is the sharpen. Okay. So your athletes are blades. Your athletes are blades that cut through, that slice through the confines of gravity. Okay. The blade gets sharpened through dynamic effort. The blade gets lengthened through brief maximal tension. Okay. So this is essentially how this works. Okay. Big picture here. Okay. So let's look at the big picture here. We already have methods in place to make us strong. So we don't need to worry about strength. Okay. But we have to get faster. Okay. So we must touch the other spectrum of velocity, right? We're getting something slow every session. We need something fast. Okay. This is how you contrast velocities in the same session. Okay. Dynamic effort, again, can be looked at as practice. Okay. Because it's going to make you a lot faster. It's going to develop that rate of force flow we're looking for. Okay. We are essentially practicing our ability to produce force quickly. Okay. So no, I do not use dynamic effort for any barbell lifts. Okay. I'm always going to opt for something that's much faster because I'm getting something so much slower, right? If I'm using the brief maximal tension method every day, I don't need something slow. I need something a lot faster, right? If my kids are sprinting all the time, right, you need something a lot slower to increase those sprint times. You can't just keep sprinting them over and over. You have to load them. Okay. So again, this goes back to the force velocity curve. How are we getting extreme adaptation? We need extreme velocities on both ends. We need to attempt to get something really slow and really fast each session. Okay. And this is how I build up my sessions. And this is kind of the way that I view training for my athletes. I've shifted over the last couple of years and changing some things around, and it's worked a lot better. And I've seen really, really good results from what I'm currently doing and messing around with as far as the setup, as far as velocities go. Okay. But this is all I have for today. Okay. Hopefully this answers your questions about the dynamic effort method and how we've really messed up, right? We've really messed up our use of the dynamic effort method when it comes to athletes. I think when it comes to powerlifting or strength sport, I think we have it down. Okay. I don't think you need to change anything from the Westside Barbell Temple when you're talking about a strength athlete. I think when you're talking about a field sport athlete, Okay. I think that we need to start changing a few things. I would even say personally for something like a thrower, okay, I don't even know if a thrower needs to change much from traditional, speed squat, speed pull type weights, right? But I do know that field sport athletes that are going to be sprinting, they need something a lot faster. Okay. But that's all I have for you guys. Hopefully this helps. Hopefully this gives you some more context and how I'm viewing the dynamic effort method. Okay. Thank you so much for listening. Appreciate it.